Today, you can meet people who have never used the internet or a mobile phone. You can even find people who cannot write or read. This is rare but true. But at the same time, it is difficult to find someone who has never worn Adidas clothes or shoes, and even more so, who has never heard of this brand. And this is not surprising, because the German brand is one of the leaders among sportswear brands today. The company is engaged in producing clothes, shoes, and accessories not only for sports but also for everyday life. Today, Adidas is overcoming such companies as Reebok, Rockport, CCM, and TaylorMade Golf. But where did this company come from? Who invented it? How did it all begin? And how did it become one of the most recognizable brands in the world? We will talk about this today. The official Adidas company was created in 1949, but its history began long before that. Adolf Dassler was born into a poor family on November 3, 1900, in a small town in Bavaria. His father was an ordinary shoemaker, and his mother was a laundress in a local laundry. Since there were no great prospects, Adolf helped his father from a young age and became a shoemaker. The family lived extremely poorly, barely enough money to make ends meet. Therefore, in 1920, the Dassler family decided to organize their own shoe manufacturing business. Adolf Dassler took over the management of the company. At that time, he was only 20 years old, and his brother Rudolf soon joined him. Friends called them Adi and Rudy. The small shoe factory of the Dassler brothers, if it could be called a factory, was engaged in the production of orthopedic shoes for athletes and house slippers, and was located in a small room of the laundry where their mother worked. The business grew, and the slippers were in demand, but this was another small shoe manufacturing workshop, of which there were several hundred in Germany alone at that time. Perhaps someone would have been content with what they had, but Adolf was obsessed with developing the company. Having gone through many experiments, which often failed, he managed to create a product that was a breakthrough in the shoe business at that time. In 1925, Adolf created the world's first boots with studded soles, which a year later became the main product of the factory. His partners were ordinary blacksmiths, the Zellen brothers, who made those very studs for the soles in their workshop. The demand for the Dassler brothers' shoes grew every day, which led to the purchase of their factory building. In 1928, together with Joseph Beitzer, the Dasslers developed and patented a new model of studded shoes, which truly made the factory famous. But how do you make your shoes wearable? That's right, you just have to give them to all the athletes. At the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin, American runner Jesse Owens won 4 gold medals and set 5 world records wearing Dassler shoes. The Dassler trademark, 2 stripes, first appeared on Owens' shoes. After this event, many athletes chose the brand's boots for their performances at the Olympics, all thanks to innovative solutions at the time. Who would have thought that it would be enough to simply attach spikes to the sole? And this would be enough to make people talk about you all over the world. In the late 1930s, sales of the Dassler brothers factory exceeded 400,000 German marks, or $100,000. In 1938, the second Dassler factory opened. In total, their enterprise produced 1,000 pairs of shoes daily. Sales grew at an extraordinary rate until World War II. But even though both Dassler brothers were convinced members of the Nazi Party, the Dassler factories were confiscated by the Nazis, and the brothers themselves were sent to the front. At one of the factories, the Nazis even tried to establish the production of handheld anti-tank grenade launchers, but the factory equipment was not suitable for such production. So Adolf returned from the army after a year to produce training shoes for German soldiers. At the end of World War II, the Bavarian town of Herzogenaurach, where the brothers' second factory was located, ended up in the American occupation zone. The elder Rudolf was accused of belonging to the elite Nazi SS troops and sent to a prisoner of war camp. Adolf was also a member of the Nazi Party, but as a contribution, he sewed hockey skates for delivery to the United States. This is what saved his position and the business as a whole. As compensation for the skates, Dassler received decommissioned U.S. Army ammunition, tents, old baseball gloves, etc. The family business had to be raised almost from scratch. In 1946, after the occupation, Rudolf returned to the family business. The brothers began producing shoes again. But given the situation in Germany after the war, the lack of raw materials, problems with the international market, and to some extent isolation, they made a rather controversial, but at the same time the only correct decision. They started producing shoes from the remains of military uniforms. They used absolutely everything. For example, they made shoe soles from old tires of military vehicles, and 47 hired workers were paid in goods, firewood, yarn, etc. However, different worldviews and visions of the further development of the company increasingly led to quarrels between the two brothers. Joint work could no longer continue as before, and this prompted them to divide all the assets. Soon after the death of their father, the brothers parted. Rudolf took the new factory and Adolf the old one. They agreed to never use the names and symbols of the family business. Adolf called his company Adidas and Rudolf his Ruda. But after a few months, Adidas turned into Adidas, an abbreviation of Adidasler, and Ruda into Puma. Thus, the world-famous brand Dassler ceased to exist. And in fact, the new brands Adidas and Puma, which we all know now, were born. The brothers themselves kept silent about the reasons for their quarrel until the end of their days. But what is most surprising is that after the collapse of the family business, the brothers did not speak to each other for the rest of their lives, and Puma and Adidas became the most fierce competitors to each other. Adolf's company quickly gained popularity. High quality and innovation helped Adidas become one of the main sports brands. On August 18, 1949, Adolf took 2 stripes from the Dassler emblem, added a third to them, and patented the resulting symbol of Adidas. Since 1952, the company began to produce other goods under the Adidas brand. The first attempt to diversify the range was the production of sports bags. Although shoes remained the main product, Adolf was looking for a partner who would take on the production of clothing. It was the owner of a textile factory, Willy Seltenrake, who Adolf ordered 1,000 tracksuits with 3 stripes along the sleeves. The goods sold like hotcakes, and the partners liked each other so much that soon Seltenrake began to sew only for Adidas. At the 1954 FIFA World Cup in Bern, the German national football team, wearing Adidas, became world champions for the first time. This was facilitated by another innovation from Adidas, removable studs on boots. Soon after this victory, sales of Adidas boots increased from 800 pairs to 2,000 pairs per day. And in 1956, the Adidas company even received official permission to advertise at the Olympic Games in Melbourne. Also that year, Adidas signed the first licensing agreement with the Norwegian factory in Gervik, and soon Adidas began to be produced in France. In the late 1950s, Adidas entered the US market, taking advantage of the growing popularity of sports and the lack of serious competitors at the time. By the late 1970s, the company already owned 24 factories in 17 countries. It sold about 200,000 pairs of shoes a day, as well as clothing, balls, and bags. In 1970, the Adidas Telstar ball became the official ball of the FIFA World Cup held in Mexico. In 1972, Adidas became the title sponsor of the Olympic Games in Munich, and the West German national team became the European football champion. This year, the company's famous trefoil appeared. The 3 leaves denote the company's presence on 3 continents. In 1974, German footballers wearing Adidas boots became world champions for the second time. And at the 1976 Olympic Games, athletes wearing Adidas won 75 gold, 86 silver, and 88 bronze medals. By the way, this record has not been broken to this day. On September 6, 1978, at the age of 77, Adolf passed away. The company's management passed to his widow Katerina. With the death of the founder, the company began its most severe crisis, caused primarily by the emergence of serious competitors. Nike and Reebok began aggressive advertising campaigns in North America in the 80s. By the end of the decade, they accounted for 50% of the sports shoe market in the USA, while Adidas's share had dropped to a critical 3%. Adolf Dassler's heirs did not stay long at the helm of the company. In 1984, Katharina died, and in 1987, Horst Dassler, the son of Adolf and Katharina, also died. The companies, which were barely afloat, were sold in 1989 by the remaining heirs for only 440 million German marks to the French entrepreneur Bernard Tapie, then the owner of the French football club Olympique Marseille, keeping only 20% of the company's shares. At that time, Adidas was on the brink of disaster. Interest in the brand was quickly fading, and the championship among sports companies was already being shared between Nike and Reebok. However, the new owner was unable to improve the company's situation. In 1993, he sold Adidas, and a few years later he was declared bankrupt. The new buyer of the company was a group of French investors who appointed Robert Louis Dreyfus as the head of Adidas. Under his leadership, the company began to be reorganized, the marketing budget was significantly increased, and production began to be moved to Indonesia, China, and Thailand. Saving on cheap labor from third-world countries made the products competitive on the world market again. Already in 1995, profits had more than doubled compared to 1994. In 1997, the French company Salomon Sports, a leading manufacturer of winter sports goods, was purchased. Until 2005, the concern was called Adidas Salomon. This step allowed the company to become the second largest world manufacturer of sports goods after Nike, increasing sales by 1.5 times, especially in the United States. In 1999, for the company's 50th anniversary, construction began on a new headquarters. Representative offices were opened in Japan, Turkey, and the Netherlands. In 2001, the formation of its retail network began. The first 2 Adidas Original stores were opened in Berlin and Tokyo in 2001 and in New York in 2002. The company was gaining momentum again, and the brand was becoming more popular every year. In 2005, Adidas sold Salomon Sports, and with the proceeds, in August 2005, Adidas bought 100% of its competitor, Reebok International Ltd., for $3.8 billion. It was this takeover that allowed Adidas to increase its share of the company's most important American sporting goods market to 20% and get as close as possible to the market leader, Nike, which controls 35%. Today, to the surprise of many, the Adidas concern has only 2 of its small factories, one in Germany and one in the USA. All products are made to order at 290 different factories. Of these, 71% are in Asia, 18% in America, 6% in Africa, and 5% in Europe. In terms of footwear production volume, 97% of products are made in Asia, including Vietnam, Indonesia, and China. In 2018 alone, 409 million pairs of Adidas shoes were produced, 11% of which were produced at the largest factory in Vietnam. Footwear accounts for 58% of the company's sales. The products are sold under 2 main brands, Adidas and Reebok. The sales volume between them is 90% to 10%. At the end of 2018, the company employed 57,000 people. The company's average turnover is $24 billion per year, and its net profit is almost $2 billion annually. Adidas is the largest sponsor of sports teams and the most famous athletes in the world. Several times, the beloved brand could have simply disappeared, gone bankrupt, and gone down in history. Adolf Dassler always put commercial success in second place. His irrepressible love for sports was in first place. He was a very active person. At 75, he still played tennis and swam in the pool. One of his hobbies was shoe design. He invented many things, including football boots with replaceable studs. He was involved in the company's affairs until his death. The path to success was thorny and long. And it was thanks to Adolf Dassler, an ordinary shoemaker from a provincial town, that this world-class giant was born.